All right, since we are still waiting for our second speaker, um, we have prepared like very last minute like lightning talk about the usage of GraphQL that we are doing at Saleor. So like Michael should arrive in like 15 minutes or so. And then after my lightning talk or after this demo, we will do a short break. And then we will go with Michael's talk. So yeah, since we are still waiting, I'd like to show one thing. Can I share my right? Actually, we had on one of the previous editions we had talk about like this topic about subscription webhooks, but it was like very early version, and now a year later we have it actually working, and we've built UI for this. So I wanted to show you what we've built and how we use GraphQL to define webhook payloads. And that will be based on Saleor example. So yeah, I think I can skip this. You know me already. I work at Saleor Commerce, where I lead the backend team that maintains the GraphQL API. And just to give you the idea what Saleor is, it's an open source GraphQL first headless e-commerce platform. A lot of buzzwords, I know, but it's all true. So e-commerce platform, I think you are all familiar with this. It's just the software that does e-commerce, such as Shopify, Magento, etc. Open source, it's pretty obvious. Like all of the things we build are basically open source. GraphQL first means that the API that we have, and like since the very beginning, we always had the GraphQL API, and we are very focused on this. This is mainly how you interact with the platform. And headless means that it comes without any storefront, which was kind of obvious in the previous e-commerce platforms that were earlier, that they were providing some front end that you were using, and in headless it gives you more ability to integrate with other systems. Yeah, and just to give you an idea, that's how the dashboard looks in Saleor. This is where you manage orders. This is where you process your order lines, and yeah, basically e-commerce, like one of the main features of e-commerce. And what we, as I said, because it's headless, it means that we are really focused on making it easy to integrate with other systems, which is often the case in e-commerce. Like you always have some payment providers you need to integrate with, like shipping providers, tax APIs. So you don't build this stuff yourself, but instead you integrate with other systems. And often your customers also use some systems they want to keep using. So that's why extensibility is very important for us when building Saleor. And to achieve extensibility, we use webhooks. So I think most of you are should be familiar with webhooks. Now most of web platforms supports webhooks. So this is basically a way to communicate with external services. So we have Saleor, which is one service, and we have different services which we call apps, and they can get notified about stuff that happens in Saleor through webhooks. And at the same time, they can also fetch data from Saleor through GraphQL API. So this is the two-way communication between between different systems, basically. And how webhooks are usually implemented is on this example, that there is an event happening, like in this case, order created, which means there is a new order placed in the shop. And then usually there is a huge JSON payload delivered to each app that listens to your webhooks. So you can register to different apps can register to those webhooks, and they will get notified about every new order. So the thing is that this JSON payload is usually predefined and fixed structure, and you don't have any way to decide what you want to get actually. Yeah, and why is this a problem? So in some cases, you can get too much or too little data. If you are getting too much data, then it's just basically, affecting the bandwidth and transferring simply. It may be slower actually. If you are getting too little data, it means that you may have like additional API calls to fetch the data that you are missing to perform something. Also, in our case, because we had this implementation like before, it meant that we were maintaining this extra layer that was only responsible for generating those JSON payloads. And at the same time, we had entire GraphQL layer. So we have like two places in code that does similar thing, because in GraphQL, the response is JSON. In webhook, the payload is also JSON, but we have two ways to build it. So we have to maintain those two ways, which is not perfect. Fortunately, we have GraphQL, and we can actually reuse GraphQL in the communication between apps in the backend. So what we've implemented is a solution where you define those queries, like subscription queries, in order to define what data you want to get. Right, so like we don't use this subscription thing that you have in GraphQL for real time. It's not real time. It's just the subscription syntax, because subscriptions are meant to represent events, basically. So let's see what we have here. That's the name of the event. We have a lot of these, and it like tells us what event we want to subscribe. In this case, order created, just as on the example before. And then we have the body of the like definition. So in this case, we are getting order data, and for this order, we are getting its number and user email. I skipped this one. That's actually pretty internal, but we implemented this by defining this interface. It's called event, and it provides a set of fields that are available in every event, such as date of issue, version of Saleor, information about the recipient, and stuff like this. And in GraphQL, you can use interfaces to like have those common fields and build specific implementations of this interface, like on the right. This is one of the events. And we have many of these. They are all implementing this event interface. And that's the example that we saw previously. And for this subscription, we would get this response in webhook payload. This is the way we use in API to define those subscriptions. So basically, each webhook is an entity in database, and it has this query field. So whenever you create a new webhook or you want to update it, you just provide this subscription syntax in here. It gets saved in the database, and whenever there is a new event happening in Saleor, we just run this subscription against our GraphQL API. So as a result, we are basically having the same benefits of GraphQL that we have in like communication between backend and frontend. So there is less data transferred because we are only getting the data that we need. We are reusing the same GraphQL schema, which is great. So it means that we don't have to maintain those two layers. We just focus on building GraphQL, and we use that both for webhooks and for the API, which is really great. We also get improved performance with this, because like the schema itself just use data loaders, which make sure that everything is optimized and not making too many database queries. So we get that as well. We can use deprecation directives, which means that we can say that the total field is deprecated and will be removed in some of the future versions, and now you have to use a different field. It's not like there is no way to achieve that in traditional webhooks, where you just cannot remove a field because some integration might be using it. In here, we can just deprecate it, so someone who maintains those webhooks can see that this field is deprecated. And as a bonus, we get auto-completion, which is really nice and makes it easy to build those queries. And to show you how it works, we have a small demo, which is really like also last minute, because now like it's basically being built right now, but it works. And let's see, actually. So yeah, this is Saleor dashboard, and this is where we define our webhooks. So in this example, I have one webhook. It's called product updated. So as you can expect, it will be called whenever there is an update to a product. Here we have some product. And what else? We will be using this little tool called webhook.site. Really recommend that if you are working with webhooks, it's a very convenient way of testing payloads. It's just a tool that gives you this unique URL, like this one, and it just receives JSON data. So you can use that for any case where you just need to provide some URL and send some payload just to test it. So it's really great in this case. So I'll be using this one. So this is my target URL. So any update to a product would send a payload to this URL. So what we have here, that's what we are building right now. It's the GraphQL playground that is embedded in our dashboard, and this allows you to build those subscription queries. So as I said, you can get this, auto completion. So you can easily type the queries and decide what data you want to get. So let's say that for every product update, I want to get the product name and its category and its name. Let's say that I want to get the ID. Yeah, now if I save this and make some update here and save this one. And here we get the payload. So as you can see, we are getting exactly the data that we asked for in the subscription. If we change this to, for example, ask for, I don't know, metadata. Let's say we want to get metadata, save this. And again, if we trigger some update here, we are getting, in this case, it's empty, but as you can see, the key is already present in the payload. So yeah, that's how it works. And what is also cool and pretty new feature is that we are actually building a dry run, which allows you to test those subscriptions without actually sending any data over the network. So it just uses our GraphQL schema to get the data. So let's say that we want to emulate the product updated event. We click this button, and here we can pick some product for which we would emulate the event. Let's say it's this one. And here we are getting the response that we would get in our integrations. So this is a great way to test webhooks. Yeah. I think that's it, actually. Lastly, yeah, if you like it and if you didn't know Saleor before, you can check this out. As I said, everything we do is open source, so if you are curious how it works, it's out there. There are also some integrations. For example, we have integration with Slack that uses this solution. So it gives you notification about new orders on Slack. So yeah, if you are curious, you can check this out. Yeah, are there any questions?
Can you subscribe to multiple events at once? Yes. And then only the first one that would happen, or you would get each of them depending
Once you start ticking the boxes, the query is actually auto-completed for you. So yeah, maybe scroll. You see, there's a new one being added automatically.
And then on the webhook side, you would decide what to do depending on the payload.
Yeah, so you would have to branch, through the event depending on the type that you receive. Yeah.
And you can also see what the clients are using. Like you can see what type of subscriptions they are making, and you can optimize the things that are slow or things like this. You could introspect what they are using basically.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I think maybe one extra point for this one, that one of the problems that it solves is the also permissions. No, what I was about to say is that, in the context of sometimes GDPR and sharing data with external services, is that in a traditional sense you receive this payload and there's so much information about customer and the address and so on and so on, and sometimes you don't want to overshare. So this is in a way a way to control data access in event-driven architecture. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So sorry to hijack your presentation.
No worries. We are here, to exchange knowledge. So there is a question behind you.
Hi, I really like the way that the subscriptions works, but I have a question. Do you have an option to get any event that will come to your system?
We had this, and we still have, but we actually want to remove this because there is a lot of events, and actually the app that listens to the events would be flooded with a lot of stuff. So we think that it's not perfect solution. Instead, you should explicitly decide what events you want to subscribe to.
Okay, and the other question is, have you considered using Event Bridge for events for AWS customers? I think it would be very good one.
I don't know, actually. It's currently webhooks are, we are using just a worker, external worker that is responsible for sending that in cloud as well, I think. But probably we could optimize this by using some dedicated solution. Like for our webhooks, you can not only use HTTP, you can only subscribe to queues, for example, but yeah, I'm not sure if that would work with subscriptions and if we support that currently. But maybe yes, it's maybe something we should.
No, Event Bridge is different. We can talk after about it. But and is there any option to, for example, rerun your events from the past?
We have API that records every webhook attempt. So when there is, and we actually don't store any success attempts because we assume that most of them are success, and also if we store them, there would be really huge amount of data stored in the database, and you are usually interested in those that fails. So we store those. So each attempt has its own ID. We also store the payload. We know what was the query. So technically you can retry them, but I think we cannot retry stuff from the past because the database changed already. So you could retry the event, but you would get different results maybe. But yeah, we record them and you can retry them.
So you are sending them only once after the change, so there is no retry policy?
There is retry. We are trying to send each one, I think 5 times with different intervals.
Mm-hmm.
If that fails, it's just recorded in the system as failed attempt, and then you have to decide. Maybe it's something broken with your integration. But what we are also building is a UI which will allow you to inspect this just from Saleor. Now you can query that from API, but there will be UI that allows you to basically track all the data that gets sent between apps and Saleor.
Okay, and one more, because you are using the syntax from GraphQL for subscriptions.
Yeah.
So you're using it underneath, or is it just a way to make developers' life easier?
It's just a way to express, to define the event structure. It's not using these GraphQL subscriptions, those real-time ones underneath, which also could be implemented in the future. Currently, we just didn't, never think about this. Also, our framework needs an upgrade because it doesn't support async stuff currently. We would have to use some external, I don't know, server for that. I don't know, but it's I think it's possible in the future.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. I think we can have a short break. I see that Michael is here, so we will make it with the third speaker, which is great. So let's see you in 10 minutes.